I wasn't first uneasy about the truck. It was the quiet. Dentons missed in early spring, they would always roll thick and curl up on porches like recalcitrant ghosts. However, that morning it seemed as though something was waiting to be discovered. In the silence surrounding our tiny home. Just now, I zipped up as I prepared to board the bus to Greenville with my old rucksack. I took one more glance at the garden I had created with my own hands. As though hesitant to part with me, each daffodil stood tall and proud. My mother shouted out from the kitchen, "Your breakfast is getting cold, Natalie." Although she spoke loudly, I could hear that it was the one she usually attempted to conceal when the time for saying farewell drew near. Helen Carter was the type of lady who loved even more and worked too much. Years of tilling had broken her hands, the ground, fixing ancient library shelves and rearing me by myself from my birth. She was flipping pancakes. With military accuracy, but she kept her eyes fixed on the window. "Sweetheart, you must eat. The journey is lengthy." Nerves twisting my stomach, I perched on the chair's edge, not that I'm hungry. She simply slid the plate in front of me without reprimanding me. Then pretend. I grabbed the fork and made myself chew. It was like swallowing gravel when I bit. The clock in the kitchen was ticking more loudly than normal, signifying the final seconds of silence before everything changed. I gave her another look. "You still think I shouldn't go?" Slowly, she shook her head. "Although you're right, I believe the city won't be kind to you. Knowledge is something that no one can take." Her smile remained shaky. "Natalie, you'll be by yourself there. I arrived at you too, and you brought me up just like that." I gripped her hand across the table. Okay, her hold tightened and then relaxed. I was at the Denton bus 2 hours later. The bus wheezed as it arrived at the depot. A dilapidated brick structure that smelt like old diesel and farewell embraces. The rain from last night streaked its pain. Mom went over her checklist again. "Money," I agreed. "In your shoes, don't talk to strangers. Text me as soon as you arrive." As if it were etched on my bones, I pretended to memorize it. When we shared an embrace, she waited longer than usual. I said, but I wasn't sure to whom, "Everything will be fine." Persuade her or me? Time seemed to stretch itself thin and translucent on the drive to Greenville. I maintained my forehead on the cool glass, observing how the lofty buildings in gray pavement blend into the green meadows. I had worked 2 jobs for years, helping neighbors weed their gardens and sorting mail at the post office to save money. I wanted to cook at culinary school so that I could not only feed people but also make them feel smug and cozy, well-maintained, and secure. Mom sold our last goat to help pay for my tuition. I felt a lot of love for that. My dorm room was tiny and he shared it with 2 girls, Amber from Charleston, and it had a slight bleach odor, and Jessie from a neighboring town who were decent but wary. We were all just trying to make it through. The classes were rigorous during the first week, and Chef Hammond didn't think that simple praise or second chances. But I relished every moment because I had been waiting years for this. Emailed Mom every night, focusing on the fun and avoiding the homesickness. Her responses were consistently brief, full of weather reports and heartfelt tiny compliments that brought tears to my eyes. Gloomy. And then everything broke one Friday. After class, I returned to the room and saw the bottom drawer of my stomach knotted as I dropped my luggage and reached beneath the mattress. We're too used all of my semester's money to tape a big envelope, and then it was gone. My ears rang. The room whirled. I pulled out every drawer, turned over my pillow. Evan frantically went through my backpack, finding everything gone. I stumbled into the breathing heavily in the corridor. At the Ra's desk, Mrs. Carton, a bitter woman with ash, simply scowled and stated that she hadn't noticed anything unusual while carrying a clipboard on her arm. I mumbled, "Sorry," and attempted to move past the tall man in the dark hoodie. But he stopped me. "Did Simeon Apple for your funds?" "How do you know that?" I froze. "I saw one of them," he shrugged. "While you were in class, your roommates started searching through your bed." "Jessie, the one wearing the pink hoodie." I took a step back. He gave me a level look and said, "Why are you telling me this?" "Since that occurred to me once, so I understand how it feels. Allow me to assist. In exchange, you can prepare dinner for me later." Blinked. He said that the man was likely a year older, had rough hands, and exuded quiet confidence. "Ryan Dalton from upstairs." I was hesitant because I had no one else to trust, but I never trusted strangers before. I murmured softly, deal and shook his hand, which was warm, rough, steady, and I didn't feel so alone for the first time since. Getting off the bus, the strategy was successful. That same evening, Ryan and I waited outside the dorm doorway until Jesse, with his heels in hand and his mascara streaked, staggered in from the club. Ryan's steptee said simply, "We know," and Jessie's face went completely white. No, without any pretense, she simply reached inside her toe and took out the envelope and gave it to me silently. I didn't inquire as to why.didn single quotes T want one. She moved out the following morning, and I cooked as promised meal for Ryan on Sunday. There weren't many things in the shared kitchen, just 2 functional burners and a dripping sink constantly. But I managed to sneak in some fresh herbs from home and make rosemary chicken with mashed sweet potatoes. Pretended to know what he was doing as he peeled carrots next to me. "So where are you from?" he inquired. "Denton?" "Town small, lots of cows and no traffic lights." "You?" "Greenville was more or less born outside of it. My mother is a teacher at a public school. In English." We spent hours discussing food and broken things, families, about laughter and power shortages during childhood Christmases. He exuded a certain ease, such as there was nothing he had to prove. Upon his return to my chamber, I hoped he would grab my hand. I found myself wishing he had, but he didn't. Above, we settled into a comfortable pattern over the following few weeks: cook, study, and crash. He would visit bringing unexpected things such as goat cheese or star anise after courses came. Me to do magic, which I did. With Ryan, cooking was different. Hadn't merely consumed food. He observed as though food had a greater meaning. Once he informed me that engineering was only an issue solutions and that cooking seemed like art to him. By the conclusion of that, it felt right to go forward this semester. After pulling our money, we discovered 15 minutes from campus is a 1-bedroom flat. It was small. The loo hardly accommodate 2 persons. The heater had its own personality and the oven was old. Our own, but we arrived home. I applied a buttery yellow paint job on the kitchen walls. Ryan swore it was temporary engineering and used duct tape to secure the unsecured doorknob. The initial evening in the we ordered inexpensive Chinese food and ate on the floor of our flat, leaving our plates on the floor on a box made of cardboard. To keep Jesse alive, he clinked his Pepsi can on mine, and continuing to have faith in others, I chuckled at overdone rice and duct-taped doors. He then gave me a kiss. Cohabitation wasn't simple. We quarreled about meals, about laundry, over my morning embrace of the bathroom mirror. But while the soup simmered, we also danced. In the kitchen. Webb prepared pancakes late at night with too much cinnamon. On the balcony, we constructed a little greenhouse with only basil, thyme, and he gave names to 3 succulents based on spices. We always ate breakfast next to Tahoe's plants, observing the green leaves as the sun pierces them. One cold I discovered. Ryan looking through an old photo album in the afternoon. "My mother sent it," he said. "I needed to see my roots," S said. He turned to an image of a young lady wearing pearls and a tight skirt. "Sandra Dalton is that person. She's cool, rigid, logical, and very Caroline's energy, but it's a little alarming here." He flipped the page. "That's my father." I grew up believing that man to be my father, Dalton, Charles. I was 5 when he left. I only vaguely recall him in a uniform and protracted quiet. He hesitated. Sandra didn't discuss him much at all. I suppose I just filled it in, the blanks on my own. I went cold. "Hold on, Charles." My throat tightened each breath. According to my mother, my dad's name was Charles as well. I never met Charles Carter Thalheim. Ryan was slow to respond. He merely gazed at me. "That's most likely a coincidental. Charles is a fairly common name." And I slowly nodded. Perhaps it was. However, I felt a whisper that I didn't want to hear yet pull at the margins of that page. We didn't discuss once more. Rather, we discussed the future. Ryan desired to start his own contracting business eventually. I envisioned myself and my partner operating a farm-to-table cafe. On the menu is Mom's blackberry pie. He began referring to me as Chefnut whenever I perfected a recipe. After he unclogged our sink, I began phoning him. "Fix it, Ryan." Includes 3 profanity phrases and a hanger. Despite its imperfections, life felt genuine, sincere, and well-deserved. Then one night, while we were drinking coffee outside the window, Ryan snatched my hand. I could see us in a real house eventually, dot with a garden perhaps and a porch. Swain, grinning, I squeezed his fingers with cows. He deadpanned only if they cooked. I wrote to Mom that evening to let her know regarding Ryan. Actually told her. Even a picture of us sitting barefoot is attached. On the floor of the flat, a smile on his face and spaghetti sauce on my cheek. I expressed my desire for her to meet him shortly. I had no idea that something inside of her would change when she saw that picture. Something connected to her hidden story so profound that it was yet painful to view. The plan was for the weekend to be filled with introductions, pie, sunshine, and uncomfortable repartee between prospective in-laws. I had been seeing Ryan for nearly a year by that point, and even though we hadn't formally announced our engagement, the idea hung on our tongues like sweetheart. To taste, we were too timid. I informed my mother that we would be visiting Denton. I desired for her to meet him. On the phone, she asked for his entire name again and sounded anxious. I assumed that she was merely my mother. Practical and protective. Ryan packed the car the morning we went, acting as though he was getting ready for a voyage to survive. Jumper cables, snacks, and even a rolled blanket confined to the trunk. According to him, small towns get cold at night, he smiled. I gave him a cheek kiss. She will adore you. His smile widened. I fixed her sink, so how could she not? The drive was snow clung to the field's margins like lace on a skirt, and everything was long and silent. Highlighted places from my early years, such as the pond where I once fell and the rusting silo where I scraped my leg while chasing fireflies. Ryan kept my hand the entire time. When he challenged a boy to run across it, were a threat, he said. I said, I still am, and he chuckled. However, the moment something changed as we went down our gravel road, and I sat up more straight, my stomach. That's funny, I replied, gesturing towards the future. That vehicle looks just like yours. A dark blue Ford, just like yours, was parked in front of the gate, Ryan's. The same fading bumper sticker and damage above the left tail light that Ryan remarked. That is my truck. Slowly, and I read, measure twice, cut once. Who's that then? We dragged him behind it before Ryan could reach. The front door opened, and a tall, blonde woman entered the porch. Well-buttoned coat. Ryan's voice rang out, Mom. I looked at he followed me up without responding when I asked him, what is your mom doing at my house? The porch steps. I heard my mother's voice, raw and broken, saying something as I was halfway through the door. That stopped me cold. Sandra, they can't know. Not like this. We must tell them collectively, please. My breath caught as I entered. The scent of cinnamon and anxiousness filled the kitchen, and my mother stood at the stove with glassy red eyes. Sandra, Ryan's both women looked up to see their mother sitting at the table with her hands encircling a cup of tea she'd not touched out simultaneously. Neither grinned. Sit down, both of you, Mom whispered softly. We must talk. Ryan's leg rocked under the table as we sat side by side, hands still clasped. Table. I'd never seen him so anxious. I was frightened. I'm going to start, my mother replied in a strained voice. You asked about your father, Natalie. I always claimed that he was a soldier and that he departed before you did for years. Born. But that was only half the story. I tightened my hold on Ryan's hand. His name was, she said, Charles Dalton, who was assigned to the same unit near Denton. He and I were involved in the early 1990s, but I was unaware of his marital status. Not initially. Sandra's lips were white when I gazed at her. By the time I discovered I was already pregnant, Mom added. I kept it from him. I didn't wish to destroy his family. I brought you up alone. Dalton, I said. I never asked him for anything. The room whirled. I glanced to Sandra, who nodded and whispered, He was your husband. Yes, he was my spouse. Her voice broke, and I told Ryan he was his for years. Even I thought so, Father, until I saw you two together and became alarmed. Jerked my hand away from Ryan as if I had been burned. But I had to stop something that wasn't meant to be. No, that not possible. I got to my feet, my legs shaking. This is a mistake. Ryan's chair squeaked as he stood up. You're wrong. He made a harsh, terrible error. Mom took a picture out of the drawer and said, You must be. There's no way. Between two women, one wearing a light blue outfit and the other my age. A young soldier stood, Mother. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I staggered outside, gasping for air. I could hear Ryan's footsteps behind me. and I felt the air cutting like glass down my neck. Stood there with his hands stuffed in his pockets without saying anything at first. At last, he muttered, "I can't believe this." Breath rising in white clouds, Natalie was the only one who ever made sense, and now they claim that we can't be, I said. He gazed at me with sorrowful, panicked eyes. What should we do now? Act as though this hadn't happened? He gestured it wasn't real. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That was between us. Broken and burning, we drove back to Greenville in quiet, not sleeping at night. Headlights, he dropped me off at the dorm as if I were a stranger, and I muttered, "I'll pack tomorrow." Carving shadows into the snow. Gently, "I'll find another place." "You retain the flat." He gave one nod. All right. I saw his truck drive off down the street before I let myself agree. All that we had created, the love, the laughter, the dreams we had together, everything suddenly felt poisonous, like a fire that had burned too brightly and too hotly. Left nothing but ash, but something inside of me wouldn't let go. Not yet. I spent days not leaving my room, skipping class, ignoring texts, and letting the world had returned to fog, and cold sandwiches were rotting in the little fridge, yet this was heavy, strangling like treachery in the air. Not the gentle kind from Denton. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face shrinking in shock. I always wished I hadn't answered them. But then I heard the soft, almost tentative tap, and as I opened up the door, I was surprised to see her. Sandra Dalton was standing in my dorm building's corridor, looking uncomfortable, and her carrying a manila envelope as if it were a sacred object, wearing a fitted coat and shiny shoes. "Can we talk?" she inquired. I simply moved away without responding. Instead of sitting, she simply stood by, the eyes darting from me to the gray sky through the glass. "I owe you more." Than Annie folded my arms. "I apologize, Natalie," she murmured softly. "I owe you the truth. Protecting my remaining dignity." "I believe we've already discussed that." "Clearly, no," she said. "You have a tally, but not the entire one." Sandra inhaled deeply before opening the package, which contained a report from a DNA test. I wasn't sure if I would bring this when it returned yesterday, but after viewing, I couldn't keep it to myself any longer after witnessing what we did to you and Ryan. Legalese, lab seals, percentages, and then the words appear as I peruse the document that caused the world to tilt once more. The likelihood of a biological relationship, 0%. I sat down carefully as my knees gave way. "Sandra, he's not Charles's son." I blinked. "But you said," and she nodded in embarrassment. "Ryan, he never was." I lied, Natalie. I informed Charles that I honestly had no idea who Ryan's father was at the time when the first became pregnant. He fled in the hopes that it would mend our marriage. In any case, I brought Ryan up thinking it was true since it was simpler. Fanny told him I wasn't sure, and I became terrified when I saw you two together. I made a mistake, Natalie, a one-night error, and I felt I had to stop it before it got worse. My marriage was failing. So I informed Charles that I was expecting his child. He departed in the hopes that it would make things better, but it didn't. She approached, put the test in my hands. Since it was simpler to maintain the fiction than to destroy my son's world, I did so. And when I saw you, I panicked, thinking I had to end it before it became worse, but I was so happy with him. The worst thing was that you believed us to be siblings. Sandra didn't flinch. Destroying two lives based on a fictitious basis, but now the truth is out. Ryan and you are not connected, either by blood or by anything. I wanted to laugh, scream, or pass out. As I looked at the page, she shook her head, so I asked the only question I could think of. Does he know? I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. Perhaps he will listen to me. I shook my fingers as I snatched the test out of her hands. Why now? Because I watched how he gazed at you, Natalie, like if you were the only thing that was stable. In a world that was always shifting, I came to the realization that I would rather take the chance of him hating me than allow him to lose you forever. I remained by the window long after Sandra had left in silence. It was raining as I moved. The envelope gripped like a lifeline against my chest. I knocked once when I arrived at their flat, which was our flat, the one I hadn't entered since that evening. Twice. No response. I phoned quietly. Ryan, it's me. I need to speak with you. Quiet. I tried again, and after a beat, I heard footsteps and a click. Please open the door. Of a lock. The door just opened enough for me to glimpse his face, which was pallid, unshaven, and red-rimmed eyes. Why are you? Here? He requested in a voice, and I extended the he remained motionless. Another envelope. I came to give you the truth. This one is unique. This one releases us. He accepted it. Read it. Additionally, for A sunk onto the couch as if the wind had left him, which surprised me because I assumed he may laugh or damage something. He added, I don't know what to believe anymore. I had always believed that I was Charles Dalton's son. I sat next to him, not too close, but close enough to observe his eyes, his temper, and his shortcomings. Sufficient. You accepted the sole version of the story that was presented to you, but that's not your fault. He gave me a serious look at that. Moment, how about us? To acknowledge that I didn't know yet, but I'm aware that we are not related. And I know that he ran a hand through his hair and said, I want to believe it, Natalie. I want to believe this. He had ceased caring. About you, I'm afraid, but the nightmare is ended. I grabbed for his hand, and he gave it to me. The rain tapped the windows like ancient ghosts while we sat in quiet. Me too. Something delicate began to repair somewhere inside of us, pleading to be allowed in. There was no music, no hurrying into each other's arms, and no spectacular reunion. It was calmer, more delicate, and swelled behind us like in the movies. Didn't stay that night. Telling Ryan, I felt like I was testing every step while standing on the ice of a half-frozen lake. Needed time to reflect, to breathe, to consider that this new reality wasn't just another old trick that is I who held on to. My hand until the last second before leaving, which signified something. Over the course of the following few days, what exted? Nothing fancy, just brief updates, check-ins, and pictures of meals. I emailed him a photo of my first cupcake on the 4th day. Because neither of us was hungry enough to finish. It was the first time that fell apart, he said. Not bad. Still. Missing your frosting. I meant it when I smiled. A week later, I knocked on the door of the flat where we once lived. Without hesitation or argument, he opened it right away and declared, I made pasta. It's certainly awful, but I thought perhaps he'd want to return home. The apartment had not altered much when I arrived, but the same second-hand store had placed new plants on the ledge. My old apron was still hanging behind the kitchen door. And I was sitting on the couch with a blanket, the counter as we laughed about him, forgetting how to boil water, and he struggled with the Parmesan. Discuss what had transpired. Not yet, but as we sat across from one another, this seemingly infinite gap felt like miles. Started to get smaller by the minute. After supper, I showed him the picture of my mention that Dr. Adam Whitman, my biological father, is a surgeon at Greenville Medical. He's not aware of my existence. Not really. Ryan's face changed. You'd like to meet him? I nodded. I believe so, but I'm not sure. He leaned forward and said, Then I'll go with you when you're ready. He looked at me and said, You don't have to. I want to. The following afternoon, a man I had never met but had always wondered about sat across from me. Dr. Whitman was cool, collected, and had a profound claim to remember my mother, Helen Carter, with a voice and eyes similar to mine. His eyes glistened when I gave him my name, and he claimed he had no idea she had a child. I would have come, he added. Muttered. I would have come if I had known. I trusted him. He didn't request, simply gave me space, time, and a bridge in case I ever decided to cross it. Ryan was waiting downstairs, leaning against the wall with his arms folded and a coffee in his hand when I left his office. Each hand. Are you all right? He said. I nodded, and he didn't ask again. Ryan was also contacted by Sandra later that week, and they met in a diner on the outskirts of town where she filled him in on everything. Regarding the incident. The bewilderment, the falsehood that became too burdensome to bear. She claimed that her father, a Denver resident called Dr. Eric Langston, never knew about you. Ryan merely stirred his coffee and didn't respond to her for a while. I've lived for 21 years. Till the spoon made a rhythmic click against the cup when he eventually asked. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. You've always been someone. I'm not. Then you, Ryan, he told me about it that night, and it was never a lie, like we used to do when our mattress was still supported by milk crates. We sat on the floor with our backs to a couch. She said, I'm not sure if I want to meet him. I already have trouble believing my reflection these days. I put my head on his shoulder. There's no hurry. Perhaps you won't. That's all right, he said. I thought I knew who I was. Now, I'm not sure I even know how to be around you. I told him, you don't have to know. Just stay and we'll work it out. His hand discovered mine. This time there was only warmth instead of shaking. We welcomed both that weekend. It felt tense as Helen wore her finest church attire to take her mother's to supper. Sandra they sat rigidly at the table as Ryan and I attempted to direct the conversation towards the wine she had brought but never touched, safe subjects. Work, including a recently opened bakery in the area, but ultimately the silence fell. Sandra murmured softly, "I don't expect forgiveness, yet I desire to create room for harmony." My mom nodded. We both made decisions, some wise. She glanced at me. I believe that withholding the truth from her would have injured our children more than they were protected. It simply left you unprepared for the reality when it found you, even if you would have protected yourself. I know they didn't embrace that night, but I understand. I'm still upset though. The edge lessened and something melted between them. When they were gone, Ryan turned to face me. What now? I reached up. Now we stop surviving and start living. He touched his cheek. He gave a leisurely smile that was simultaneously old and modern. 3 weeks went by like a dream. We dared not call it not quite real. Not quite real. Nearly a work of fiction, hovering between possibility and memory. Ryan and I relocate slow, methodically, as if they were relearning to walk after a long fall. Each breakfast, each grin shared. Every peaceful evening spent watching old films and ordering takeaway was a thread that was sewn back into something that looked like tranquility. I was in the kitchen that night chopping carrots for soup when Ryan arrived with a bunch of chrysanthemums. They looked like something you grow on a windowsill, he continued, white, wild, a little unruly. I buried my face. He grinned and said, "You remembered my favorite in the petals. Unforgettable." I said it that evening while we were eating dinner by candlelight on the floor. Aloud, "Let's invite everyone. Our mothers, my father, you might." Ryan blinked. "You want to put them all on one table, one dinner, father, in the same room?" "Yes," I replied. "As the silence will remain if we don single quotes T. speaking on our behalf." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's get started." The guest list wasn't Whitman agreed right away, being kind and patient while already easing into us with the quiet dignity of a guy who had lost time but didn't plan on losing any more. Ryan's new duty as a father. Dr. Langston, the biological father, was more difficult. Initially, he was in disbelief, almost to the point of Ryan composed a handwritten letter that was 3 pages long and contained no words that had been removed, consented to travel up from Denver. "I'd like to sit at your place, but I'm not sure what kind of place I have in your life," he added. "If there's a spot at your table." We got ready. The flat had never seen this much work. I ironed cloth, borrowed extra chairs from a neighbor. I pulled out my grandmother's ceramic serving platter and made napkins for the first time in my life. Ryan attempted to mend he used an old geometry textbook to balance the unsteady table leg that almost broke the entire thing. Engineering, innovative problem solving. He said that on the evening of the meal, the flat was illuminated with candles, and the aroma of vanilla custard and rosemary chicken filling the kitchen. Ryan was wearing the only button-down shirt he had, and I was wearing a shirt that was cooling on the ledge. Before they arrived, my mom came first, followed by a lovely blue dress that had been hanging unworn in the back of my closet, appearing more anxious than she did on the day. She dropped me off to culinary school while holding a jar of peach preserves. School, you look brave. You look lovely, she continued, giving me a firm hug. Dr. Whitman trailed behind, tall and calm, his hand trembling only slightly as he gave me a bouquet of sunflowers. He whispered, "For my daughter." Sandra then arrived, holding a plate of dialed eggs as if it were a peace offering. She was embarrassed but determined, kissing Ryan's face, and startled us both by giving me a hug. Dr. Langston arrived last, fresh. I kept this from Med. I was at the airport with a tiny box that included a compass. He told Ryan, "School." I thought, perhaps it's time to pass it on. We sat, all of us, 7 of us, gathered around a single table for a single lunch. And initially the dialogue seemed secure, tiny, courteous. "How's the Denver weather? How's the new job at the library?" Sandra then turned to face Helen and remarked, "I know I hurt every individual in this room, but I want to attempt to fix that for the rest of my life." Nobody said anything at first. My mother then nodded, and I believe we all broke something. At this point, we all have veto construct. Ryan grabbed my hand from beneath the table and cleared his throat. "I want to say something, if that's all right." Everyone looked at him, and he got up. evidently anxious, yet with the calmness I had come to appreciate in him. Acquired, not inherited. A year ago, I encountered a girl in a corridor who had just been robbed, and she appeared to have been through a lot, yet she still had the fire to prepare a homemade lunch using a partially stocked refrigerator. I believed I was assisting her, but it turns out she made me genuinely like him. His voice faltered. I spent my entire life attempting to live up to the standards of a guy I believed to be my father, but I now understand that who we are isn't about DNA. What matters is what we decide to preserve, the types of individuals we choose to be, and the types of love we decide to hang on to. He gave me a glance at that moment, and I decided to choose you. Tears fell before I could stop them. I want to create a messy, complex existence with you. I love you, he added. Genuine. Everything. The room was filled with a nice silence before quiet, non-loud applause, but sincere. We lifted our glasses with wine for the others and lemonade for my mother. I toasted to everything we had yet to become rather than the past. A month later, I sat by myself in a park bench, my breath quickening with every passerby, my fingers twitching the strap of my purse. I needed the time. So it didn't matter that I was early, I was actually 30 minutes early. The air was cool and brilliant with the aroma of early spring, and a carousel nearby was playing soft music that gave the occasion a slight lightning and too big. I was seeing my father again today, but he wasn't the man I'd envisioned for years. A ghost in my mother's tailies, a soldier in a picture. But the man who sat across from me too, when I mentioned his name, Adam Whitman, he sobbed a few weeks ago. In a hospital cafe. That day I had remarked, I believe I am your daughter. He hadn't denied it. He had just stated, I was wondering when you'd find me. Now he had turned aside, was approaching me once more, holding a tiny paper bag in one hand and a coffee in the other. For the croissant, he murmured bravely. I accepted. It with a smile, you recalled? We sat in silence for a while, observing ducks floating across the pond. He remarked, you have your mother's shoulders. However, I believe the rest describes me. Before I could stop myself, I asked, do you regret it? He didn't know me. I don't regret knowing you now, but I do regret all I missed. Wasn't flawless. It didn't make the years go away, but it was significant. In the meanwhile, Ryan had begun sending Dr. Langston brief letters every week, sometimes just listing the books he watched reading, cooking with me, and fixing things around the flat. Yet every letter concluded with the same phrase, I me am still. Discovering who I am, but I am thankful that you are now a part of that journey. One evening, while we were sitting on the balcony, Ryan replied, you know, it still scares me, as he stood in my little jungle of succulents and plants. Occasionally, I nearly lost you because of that one poor decision, and one hidden fact forever. I looked in his direction, but it didn't. He brushed a lock of hair and grinned up behind my ear. Even though we had no idea what we were fighting for, I'm pleased we did. Next week, we went back to Denton's Lake, where everything had changed. The Idishans bad disful. Identical trees, the identical soft rippling sound of water, but the eerie feeling had vanished. It felt rejuvenated, recovered. We agreed to a lease that afternoon for a slightly larger flat with genuine flooring and windows that didn't leak. We moved in with my mom's aid. She brought too many old drapes, casseroles. Sandra traveled across the state to send a housewarming present. Dr. Whitman came by once with a waffle iron and a scribbled recipe that read, for Sunday mornings worth remembering. A week. He even surprised me at a final exam at the university where I was completing my culinary degree. Presentation, including a solitary sunflower and the most ridiculous burnt toast joke I've ever heard. I presented him with my academics like my dad. The words stuck even though they felt weird on my tongue. Eventually, Ryan and Dr. Langston met face to face, calm, formal, and steady. They spent hours strolling in a Denver botanical garden. Upon returning home, Ryan declared, he's not the man I imagined, but I'd like to know him. That was sufficient. Next, one Ryan woke me up on Sunday morning before the sun had risen completely. He guided me to the park by holding my hand, where we once challenged me to teach him how to make biscuits from scratch while we were out for a stroll before class, and I ended up dusted with flour. He knelt there beside a tree that was just starting to bloom. No fanfare, just us and no crowd. He said, I've loved you as a Natalie Carter. Unknown, as a possibility, as a miracle. I also want to love you as my wife, even if I felt I had to let go of you. Just us and the truth we decided upon. No more misunderstandings, no more quiet. Of course, I cried. Of course. It was an unassuming gold band with a little, delicate greenstone. It made me think of Sage, he said. Everything grows because of you. I do, I muttered. When you're close. The wedding was scheduled for late autumn. Not much, only family, a table laden with homemade food, mismatched seats, and close companions beneath the trees. I baked the dessert myself. Ryan used reclaimed wood to construct the arch. We were led down the aisle by our mothers, adjacent to one another. And that day, as I gazed into his eyes, I saw no signs of anguish or no longer doubt. I witnessed everything we had built and everything we had survived. My life wasn't what I had anticipated, however, it was the one that we created together. We were standing in the garden that evening. I rested my head on Ryan's shoulder when we were laughing and enveloped in string lights, whispering, we should have broken Yaukna with everything. We didn't, but he squeezed me harder. No, I stated. That Weckrucht, we didn't break, but we cracked. Stars burst into vision above us like little pledges. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace within myself. In retrospect, I've come to the conclusion that nobody ever teaches you in school. Family is more than simply blood. Furthermore, love isn't always about the happy ends of fairy tales. Sometimes the decision is to listen, ask the difficult questions, and stay, even if it is painful. You should forgive because you deserve serenity, not because they deserve it. All of us were brought up by flawed individuals. However, that does not mean we must continue to repeat their lies, their fear, and their silence. We have the option to interrupt the cycle, communicate, heal, and create something better, even if it requires time despite the chaos. Above all, we have the option to choose love. Not fussy kind, but the kind that recovers from adversity. That's what kept me alive, and it might perhaps save you.